Day 32, Exodus chapter 7, 8, and 9. There are seasons when God does not whisper. He speaks plainly, and still people refuse to listen. Today is not just about plagues, miracles, or Pharaoh's stubborn heart. The whispers I share are about authority, resistance, timing, and the quiet danger of becoming too familiar with God's warnings. When the Lord spoke to Moses, God did not say Moses would act powerful. He said Moses would represent divine authority. God sometimes places ordinary people in extraordinary positions, not because of their strength, but because someone else refuses to listen to him directly. Pharaoh had ignored God long enough that God now spoke to him through a man. Sometimes God speaks to us through a child's question, a repeated warning, a message we don't like, a voice we don't respect, and we miss it, because we're expecting thunder, not truth. Moses didn't become proud. He became obedient. Authority in God's kingdom is not about volume, it's about alignment. After the Nile turned to blood, Pharaoh turned and went into his palace and did not take even it to heart. This wasn't ignorance. This was emotional distance. Pharaoh saw the sign. He acknowledged the disruption, but he went back to comfort. How many times do we do the same? We hear a message that convicts us. We sense God nudging us. We promise to think about it later, and later becomes never. Pharaoh didn't deny the miracle. He normalized it. One of the most dangerous spiritual states is not rebellion. It's indifference. When warning signs no longer move your heart, something deeper is happening. During the plague of frogs, at first, the frogs were merely annoying. Then they became unbearable. Then they began to decay. What you tolerate instead of address will eventually stink. Unrepented habits, unresolved bitterness, delayed obedience. They don't disappear. They pile up. The land didn't reek because of frogs alone. It reeked because the problem stayed too long. God sometimes allows discomfort to linger, not to punish us, but to force clarity. If something in your life keeps returning, ask yourself, am I asking God to remove it or asking him to transform me? But when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not. Up until now, the magicians had an answer. They could imitate, they could distract, they could compete. But suddenly, their power stopped working, and they had to admit, this is the finger of God. Every false system eventually meets a limit. What looks impressive at first, money, influence, manipulation, shortcuts, eventually fails under pressure. There comes a moment when imitation collapses and truth stands alone. If you've ever felt discouraged because others seem to replicate God's blessings without God, this passage reminds us, fake power always runs out. When Pharaoh offered compromise, Moses refused. This is not fear, it is spiritual discernment. Moses understood something vital. Not every invitation is safe. Not every permission is approval. Not every open door is from God. True worship sometimes looks offensive to the surrounding culture. If your obedience never costs you comfort, it may not be obedience. Moses refused to worship God in a way that diluted truth for acceptance. You don't need to blend in to belong to God. Then came the boils in chapter 9. The same men who once stood confidently beside Pharaoh now could not even stand upright. Pride eventually collapses under pressure. When healing is needed but humility is absent, breakdown follows. God didn't just silence the magicians, he removed their posture. Sometimes God allows discomfort not to destroy us, but to bring us to our knees, where healing actually begins. Verse 30 describes when someone repeatedly hardens their heart, and God eventually uses their resistance as a stage for truth. This is both a warning and an encouragement. A warning, do not assume delay means exemption. An encouragement, even resistance cannot cancel God's plan. God's purpose always outlives human defiance. Not everyone ignored God. Some listened, some acted quickly, some took God at his word, even while serving a stubborn leader. Faith does not always require perfect surroundings. It requires timely obedience. If God is warning you gently today, don't delay. The whisper in chapter 9, verse 31 and 32 is not random agricultural detail. It's divine timing. God did not destroy everything at once. Some things were spared, not because they were better, but because their season had not yet come. If you are wondering why some areas of your life feel untouched while others feel shaken, remember this: God works in seasons. What is preserved today may still require obedience tomorrow. Delay is not denial, and preservation is not permission to ignore Him. If you are seeking God today, don't harden your heart. Take Him seriously now, because those who fear the word of the Lord always find shelter in time.